Hello, Awaken Church. I'm Richard, and this is this week's Sermon Spark Notes. This past sermon, we looked at a new sermon series, which was Christmas Carols, 'Tis the Season. And so I had an opportunity to talk about We Three Kings, which is one of my favorite hymns or carols. We looked at the history of the song. We looked at the words, the meaning behind the words of that song. And then we looked at the Bible, the scripture, Matthew 2, 1 through 16, where the inspiration came from for that song. We found out it actually doesn't say how many wise men or kings there are. So there might have been 3, there might have been 20, we don't know. We also found out that they weren't necessarily called kings in the scripture. They were called either magi or wise men. And then we looked at, how does that scripture and how does the song, what does it say to you? And so I wanted to just look at a couple of things, some questions that I asked, and offer them to you to continue to think and pray about this week. One is I wanted to look at the gifts. So we talked about the gifts that they brought. They brought gold, which was very valuable, indicated royalty. And that identified Jesus as king. And then we looked at frankincense. We looked at that it was an incense that was often used for temples and burning in temples. And so that was something that identified Jesus as God. It indicated his divinity. And lastly, we looked at myrrh. That was a spice that was used for embalming, for burials, and sometimes even for healing. And so that identified Jesus' humanity. And so we see that those 3 gifts were perfect for God and for Jesus in his time. They brought those gifts as an act of worship to him. So I wanted to ask you all, what are the gifts that you're bringing to Jesus? The gifts, they may not be monetary, they might be. Are you using your gifts and your physical items to glorify God, what you have? But it also could be your time. We have a gift of time. We all have a limited amount of time. So what are you doing with that gift of time? Are you using it to worship God, to proclaim his name to others? Or are you using it for your own fortune and for your own purposes? So there might be some things that you might need to stop doing with your time so that way you have time to spend for God. And lastly, what are your spiritual gifts? How are you using those? God has told us that we all have spiritual gifts that we can use for his glory and for his kingdom. It says that we're a body of believers and that the gifts can be used within that body. And each one has a purpose. So I encourage you to find out what your gifting is. We love to come alongside you, help figure out what that is, and then how can you serve? Here in Awaken Church would be great, or wherever you feel called to. We just really want you to be able to be using those gifts that God has given you. I hope you have a great week and be blessed.